Playoff Jimmy might have changed the post season by himself. Giannis is down 3. One because Jimmy took over, which he's done for years. So why did team after team give up on Jimmy in his career? The Sixers were idiots to pay Tobias Harris over him, but it all started with the Bulls, who didn't believe he was good enough to build around. Their front office has been a mess going back to Michael Jordan. They let him go after the last dance thinking, no big deal, we can just rebuild. That was 25 years ago. And to the people who say, oh, Minji was going to leave anyway, he wouldn't have come back. He made his decision. You're forgetting about the bombshell we learned in the documentary. We give you 1-year contract to try first step. Would I sign for 1 year? Yes, I would have signed for 1 year. We could have won 7. So the GM Jerry Krauses gave up 5 years later in 2003, replaced with John Paxson. He made a decision nobody talks about that ruined the franchise. You can argue NG was past his prime in '99. That's the opposite of his son, Jimmy Butler. He's not really a son. The Bulls let go of a two-way all-star in his prime. Since when did teams do that? Since then, Jimmy Butler snapped the 13-year playoff draw out of the Timberwolves, took the Sixers within a Kiwi shot of a title run, drugged the young Heat to the finals, was one shot away from another finals last year. The Bulls have one playoff win that entire time. Trading Jimmy Butler was the nightmare turning point after Michael Jordan. So why did they make such a dumb decision? Jimmy was homeless as a kid growing up in Houston, but was taken in by a family of a teammate. He worked his way up from junior college to Vince Player and Marquette to a starter. In 2011, the Bulls made him a late first-round pick. After D, Rose took him to the East Finals. In 2013, Jimmy introduced himself in the playoffs, scored 15 points a game to close out a 7-game series against the Nets. The Bulls lost in round 2, but Jimmy played nasty defense on prime LeBron James. It was an early sign. The 23-year-old was a big game player, but he really broke out in his 4th season in 2015. Jimmy's scoring jumped from 13 points to 20. He became an all-star and easily the most improved player of the year. D. Rose was still dealing with injury, so Jimmy Butler became the Bulls franchise player at 25 years old. In the playoffs, he dropped 25 points a game, getting Pascianos in the box. Then they were up 2. One against LeBron's Cavs. Jimmy hits a 3 to make it a 2-point game. With 12 seconds left, D. Rose ties it up at 84. They were about to go up 3, one with a path to the finals. But look at the Cavs bench. LeBron's coach tries to call a timeout, but the ref doesn't see it. They had no timeouts left. That should have been free throw for the Bulls in possession, but the ref didn't see it. Instead, LeBron hits the game winner to tie the series. If it weren't for bad officiating, the Bulls should have beat LeBron and had a chance to win the chip, so it was clear. Put a good team around Jimmy, good things happen. But the only people who couldn't see that was the Bulls front office. That summer, guys like Hassan Whiteside and Chandler Parsons were getting big contracts. Jimmy got paid the same as Enes Kanter seriously. The next year, they let go of D. Rose and Joakim Noah to build around Jimmy Butler. This was their chance to put a quality roster around their young star. But instead of going with young talent or waiting to get a great free agent, they signed old D. Wade and Rondo. What? On top of that, the locker room fell apart. After a bad loss to Atlanta, Jimmy and Wade called out the young players for not caring enough, so Rondo fired back at them on IG. Jimmy criticized Fred Hoiberg for not coaching them hard enough. It was reminiscent of when he questioned D. Rose's work ethic. Pretty soon, the media labeled him as a cocky locker room cancer. So that off-season, the Bulls traded Jimmy to the T-Wolf for Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and Lauri Markkanen. The idea was to end the old era and give the new coach his own guys. They chose Fred Hoiberg over Jimmy Butler. You'll wonder why they've been horrible since Michael Jordan. That kind of decision. Now, some people will say, well, it was the right choice. I mean, Jimmy had run his course in Chicago and getting Zach LaVine was smart. But when you look at Jimmy's career since then, it's not close. Jimmy got to Minnesota expecting a supermax contract. He played with Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. Got him the 3 seed in late January, but Jimmy got hurt, and they slipped all the way down to 8th. They got destroyed by the Rockets in the playoffs, but Jimmy questioned the commitment of young players, especially Karl Anthony Towns. That summer, the Wolves gave Wiggins a full max, but refused to pay Jimmy, the man who just drugged them to the playoffs for the first time in 13 years. Oh, and by the way, look at Karl Anthony Towns now. Did you see what happened with him and Mike Conley? That's the kind of attention to detail you gotta have. You can't just go home, play video games. Like, this is the time to do the extra work. What's good? Jimmy was right years before anyone, so he demanded a trade before training camp. At practice, Jimmy beat the starters with the backups and called them out to their face. They finally dealt him to Philly, where he finally found the best friend. Him and Joe Embiid loved to work hard and get in your face, but Ben Simmons was the opposite. Jimmy called out Ben for being soft years before the entire world found out. So he told Philly it's either me or Ben Simmons, and they chose Ben. For some reason, every step along the way, whenever Jimmy called out dysfunction, he was right, but then he's the one to get traded. It's a classic case of your draft perception sticking with you. I mean, Jimmy was always thought of as an underdog, not elite. Even though once he was established in the league, he proved the scouts wrong. But teams always picked the other guys ahead of him because of that bias. But it all started with the Bulls. And on the 6-year anniversary of trading Jimmy, he did this. The Bulls say they're going to run this team back because, honestly, they have no other choice. They have no picks to trade. They have no cap space. They're in basketball hell, and it can all be traced back to the awful decision to trade Jimmy. Buckets. Just look at this series against the Bucks. Even before Giannis got hurt, Jimmy led Miami to a Game 1 win. With 35 points and 11 assists, not known as a great three-point shooter, but he knocked down all 4 threes in Game 3 for 30 points. They won. Why? Because in big games, playoff Jimmy is a thing. But the worst part, the Bulls saw that exact pattern and still didn't believe in him. When they had the chance, they blew it with stupid signings of D. Wade and Rajon Rondo.